This video is about the most common emotions you might experience if you are in an abusive relationship. I made this because when I was the target of an abusive relationship, I experienced that the emotions were one of the hardest parts about dealing with that situation. I would keep changing my mind about the answers to important questions like, should I keep believing in this person? Do I really think they can change? Should I give them a second chance, or should I just leave the relationship? My answers to those questions would be completely different on different days based on which one of those strong emotions was really pulling me in different directions at that time. On the one hand, I really loved this person and felt loyalty towards them, but on the other hand, I knew that their actions repeatedly were dangerous and unacceptable. Why did I keep changing my answer? Because emotions are powerful, and in an abusive relationship, they pull you in very different directions, which can be hard to deal with and make you very inconsistent. So this video is to help you deal with your emotions much better, which will leave you feeling happier and more clear about your decisions. Finally, for each of these emotions, we'll cover some real advice from people who have been in that situation before about how to deal with that emotion in a more helpful way. One last thing before we start, I really truly believe that not processing your emotions first is one of the #1 ways to stay stuck in an abusive relationship for a long period of time. That's actually what happened to me. For example, if you leave and then a few days later you go back, you're just going to stay in that relationship over and over again. It takes consistent action over time, and consistent action usually requires more emotional clarity. That's what this video is intended to help you do. Okay, so let's get started. The first emotion that you're likely to experience in an abusive relationship is conflictedness, or feeling pulled in different directions. What this tends to feel like is a mix of both love and happiness and positive emotions, and negative emotions such as betrayal and distrust and disappointment and unhappiness. It's this weird signature hallmark of abusive relationships that you experience both poles of the spectrum. It's not indifference towards a person. It's strong positive feelings and strong negative feelings, because on the one hand, the behavior is totally not okay and produces all sorts of disappointment and betrayal and mistrust, etc. But on the other hand, you probably have a lot invested in that relationship, like it's a spouse or a long-term boyfriend, girlfriend, or a family member, etc., where there are a lot of positive things there. One particularly strong aspect of this is loyalty versus wanting to leave. On the one hand, you feel loyal because of the relationship. On the other hand, you want to leave because the behavior is not okay. A very common side effect of this emotional conflictedness is feeling like there might be something wrong with your emotions. For example, you might wonder, why do I still have positive emotions like love towards somebody who treats me like this? Does that mean there's something wrong with me for loving someone like that? On the other hand, you might wonder, how could I be such a bad husband or spouse or family member to distrust this person, or to not want to give them another chance, or to want to leave them? Shouldn't I feel more loyalty towards them, or more love and unconditional trust? You can really feel like there's something wrong with your own emotions from either side of the spectrum, or both. Okay, so if you're experiencing conflictedness, what are some things that real people who have been in that situation have found helpful? First, just remind yourself that it's totally okay to have emotions that are in conflict. That's a normal part of being human. Most human relationships are not purely positive or purely negative. For example, say that you had a family member who slowly became an alcoholic. You still love them and you still care about them, but you may deeply feel disappointed or, not okay with some of the actions that they have taken and their behaviors. The point is, our emotions for someone, positive or negative, don't just turn off when something else happens. We usually retain both of the emotions on both sides, at least for a long time. You can't always control your emotions, and you don't have to. It's normal to have plenty of feelings, and they can seem to conflict, and you're still a normal human person. #2, remind yourself that it's much more important what you do and how you act versus exactly how you feel. You can feel two different things. The important choices in life are which ones of those feelings you decide to act on. And the third thing that helps deal with conflictedness is simply recognizing that it's there. Even just noticing that conflictedness is happening can often, for some reason, take the stress level down quite a bit. It just helps you to feel a little bit less pulled in different directions if you recognize exactly what's going on. So I really encourage you, when you're feeling strong emotions, to just say, okay, which two emotions are pulling at me right now? Sometimes that will even change how you feel right then and there. And again, just remind yourself that feeling conflicted is totally normal, especially in this kind of a situation. The second of these emotions that you may experience in an abusive relationship is an erosion of your confidence. There's often a lot of abusive comments or verbal criticism that comes at you from the other person, and probably not a lot of positive comments or appreciation coming along with that. Over time, this can really wear someone down, even if they're a very confident individual to begin with. To make it worse, abusive relationships usually over time start to involve isolation from friends and family, where you start to see your friends and family less and less. That makes it easier for your confidence to get lower because you're getting less of the information from your friends and family about how you're doing, and you're getting more of it from the abusive partner in the relationship. When this happens to you, you can start to feel bad about yourself overall, or about a part of your life, like your appearance or your cooking or your intelligence or your ability to deal with relationships. It could be everything, or it could be certain areas that the verbal abuse tends to focus on. And this can even be a cycle where if you start to stop believing in yourself, then you actually start to get worse at those things too. Like if you start to feel bad about your appearance or your intelligence, you might just be less confident and try less in certain areas, which can actually make your performance worse in those areas. Or this erosion of confidence can lead to other related problems in your life, like leading to depression, or in the long term leading you to stop going for other opportunities in your work or in your social life, etc., that you might have gone for if you were more confident. Okay, so if you're experiencing erosion of confidence, what are some real things that other people who have been in that situation have found really helpful to remember? Number one, remind yourself that other people's perspectives may be much more accurate than the abusive person's perspective. For example, a friend of mine experienced a ton of negative criticism from her partner about her cooking abilities and cooking skills. Over time, that eroded her confidence, and she felt like she wasn't as good of a cook as she had thought before. She got her confidence back when she realized that her abusive partner wasn't really the most unbiased source of information, and might even be providing an abusive perspective and a biased perspective. It made more sense that that was true because her abusive partner had always liked her cooking a lot before they had started acting weird and abusive, and her friends and family still thought she was a great cook, and she still really liked her cooking, and nothing had really changed from before. And so the only thing that had really changed was that this abusive person had slowly started to become really negative about everything towards her. And realizing that was part of the journey towards getting her confidence back in that area. And by the way, she is a fantastic cook. A second and even better strategy that many people have found to deal with negative criticism and erosion of confidence is just taking an internal perspective. So instead of thinking about my friend's perspective and my family's perspective are better than this abusive person's perspective, you just say, I'm not going to care about anybody's perspective. I'm going to ask myself what I really think. So if it's about your appearance, ask yourself, how do I really feel about how I look? If it's about your cooking, ask, how do I think that my cooking tastes? In the long term, that's honestly really the healthiest way to do it. You don't have to do it that way. You can go to friends and family first if that's better. But in the long run, that truly is the healthiest way to engage with that kind of situation. So if you can manage it and you're not too worried about being your own worst critic, I strongly encourage you to try to take this internal perspective. If that feels like too much in certain areas, or you feel prone to self-criticism and that doesn't sound like a good idea at the time, maybe do a combination of both. So in areas where you feel okay with it, take an internal perspective. In areas where you tend to strongly self-criticize, maybe also rely on some friends and family, but just don't rely solely on the abusive person's perspective, because that's not healthy. The last thing that really can help with erosion of confidence is a therapist or a counselor. Now, I know a lot of people don't have access to it or can't afford it, or if they're still in the abusive relationship, aren't able for whatever reason to go talk to a therapist or counselor. So you might have to rely on step 1 and step 2 that I just went through. But if you do have access to one, I strongly encourage it, because they're a professional and they can help you sift through different emotions and understand what feedback about you and yourself and your abilities is really accurate, and what feedback really you should just discard. Now, the third of these most common emotions you may experience if you're in an abusive relationship is a deep sense of loss. Whatever it is that you and that abusive person have together, whether it's an engagement or a marriage or children in a family or whatever other family relationship it is, you may lose that if you lose the relationship. That can lead to a deep sense of loss and a sense of not wanting to lose that relationship. This can be a very powerful feeling with a lot of side effects. It can also lead to a sense of just sadness, and for me, this is one of the ones that really hits home on a personal level. This sense of loss can also be very difficult to deal with for another reason, which is that it can just be hard to admit to yourself that you may have lost this thing that you had with this person. So let's talk about some of the real strategies that people have used when they've experienced this sense of loss. First, simply remind yourself that loss is a real thing that is difficult to process and may take a lot of time for you to come to terms with. One of the unique challenges of many abusive relationships is that people don't start to give themselves permission to grieve or experience senses of loss because there's no single event that ends the relationship right away. Normally, if there's a big event like a divorce or a breakup or a huge argument with a family member, it's easier to admit to yourself that there is a big problem or a loss that you are reacting to, and then to go through those stages of emotion and to maybe get some help from your support network and to just be a little bit kinder towards yourself and more understanding towards yourself. I really encourage you to just admit, hey, I'm in an abusive relationship. I might lose this relationship. That makes me feel really sad, or that makes me feel really depressed, or that makes me feel however it is that you feel about that situation. That can be the start of going through that series of emotions that you really need to go through in order to be able to make good decisions and process all of those emotions and then come to a place of certainty. A second strategy that can really help with dealing with a sense of loss is to admit to yourself that the relationship may truly already be lost. This can be a very sad one and hard one to do, because admitting to yourself that your relationship might be lost can really hurt. If you can admit that the relationship may already be lost, it cuts down on a lot of that rationalization behavior and making excuses for the other person, giving too many second chances, believing things that you really shouldn't believe, and emotionally giving yourself a yo-yo effect of believing in them and then getting disappointed and then etc. By the way, despite how much it hurts to admit this, I do really believe it is true. If you find yourself with an abusive partner, there is a very low chance that that person is going to have a gigantic turnaround and turn into a healthy relationship. There are courses out there for people to try to help them change, but the success rate on those is very low, and it takes a lot of commitment on the part of the abuser to actually make a change. Most abusers do the exact opposite. They shift the blame to other people, they don't take responsibility, and they say sorry and make promises, and then they just keep doing it again. Again, I know that that really hurts, but the sad truth is that the sooner that you admit to yourself that you might lose this relationship, the better, because that is definitely one of the possible outcomes. If you are experiencing a strong sense of loss, my heart goes out to you, because I have too, and I really know how hard it is, and I know that you may be experiencing that in isolation because of the way that abusive relationships tend to work. It does get better on the other side. It does also take time to move forward and heal. What I really encourage you to do is to move forward, but go at your own pace so that you can be gentle with yourself as you move forward. Okay, thanks for watching. That's the end of this video. In the next video in the series, linked below, we'll cover other very strong emotions that can be helpful to understand, like feeling that it's your obligation to take care of all of the things about the other person and the entire relationship, feelings of self-blame, and feeling guilty for either the abuse happening to you or for negative consequences reputationally or legally that may happen to your abuser as a result of things that are happening. Thanks so much for watching, and please click the link in the description below for the next video in the series.